It's the final game of the 2001 season. By 5 o'clock today, there will be a new NBL champion. Neither Townsville nor Wollongong has ever reached these lofty heights previously, but they have shown levels of experience, maturity and determination that has many touting them as the powerhouse teams of the coming years. Can Coach of the Year Brendan Joyce take his team to new heights in the cauldron of the swamp? Or will the experience and home crowd of the Crocs be too much for Wollongong? It's time to check in at the swamp, where a raucous welcome awaits for the deciding game of the NBL 2001 season.
Hello everybody and welcome. It is NBL Rewind. Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. And of course, where I'm assuming you should have, and if you haven't, watched an absolute classic all the way back to 2001. If you haven't got involved just yet on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on NBL TV, do it, especially the Hawks heads. This is going to be a big one. Liam, Stan and Marie, hello to you.
Hello, Cam. Yes, our second time diving into the story of this team throughout this Rewind series, because it's one of the best championship winning teams in NBL history. Not just in terms of how beloved they are and the stories and everything that took place. So looking forward to getting stuck in.
And we talk about Dillawarra Hawks. They win a championship. They become the first New South Wales team, not just to win the NBL championship, but to make the NBL Grand Final series. And well, I'll tell you what, who better than tell us all these stories? We already got the Game 3 semi story, and it was long from Damon Lowry. Let's hear from the head coach, Brendan Joyce. Joycey, welcome to NBL Rewind.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having us. And I watched Damon's story. I thought he was awesome.
Mate, he was awesome then. He's awesome now. You were great. And we've got so many different avenues we can take this. Of course, you played so long in the league as well, part of the Australian program at Olympic Games and all the rest of it. But let's start. Let's just go straight to Game 3, because you've had a hell of a year. You're in Townsville. Talk to us about the build-up after losing Game 2.
Well, it all starts losing Game 2. And I'm looking around the rooms, and you lose Game 2, and you've lost it in Townsville, and the crowd's going nuts, as everybody would know. It was a great place to play from that point of view, but also, you know, a huge advantage for the Crocs, the way the crowd was. And I'm looking around the room, we've just lost by 18 points. Like, we just didn't lose. They pounded us, and you could tell there was a smell in the air of thinking that they were going to win the championship. And, you know, there was obviously doubt within us. But I'm looking in the room, and I'm thinking, who am I going to take to the press conference with me? Who's not bothered? Who's probably going to be upbeat? Who's going to be... And it was two guys. Obviously, I had a choice between Damon Lowry and Charles Thomas. But with Charles Thomas, if you actually knew his personality, you know, he was the perfect guy. We nicknamed him Sunshine. I don't know if you remember the show, Remember the Titans? Mm-hmm. You know, you remember the quarterback who came in really cool and calm and didn't really give a damn about anything, right? Nothing seemed to faze him. And Charles was, and we had a team movie earlier in the year. I thought this would be a great movie to have the team, you know, to just display what it takes to be a team. Great examples, as you know, from a racial point of view as well. So after that and getting to know Charles, I started calling him Sunshine, because nothing seemed to faze him, you know, to the point where, you know, in Adelaide early in the year, sorry, I've got to give you the story, guys, because there's a little to it.
Fire away.
I decided to give Damon Lowry the free throws on a technical foul, and in one of the games, and he was actually, it was a game before Adelaide, before we played Adelaide. So we're in a team meeting. He goes, Coach, you know, you're planning for the next game, which is Adelaide, in Adelaide. So this is during the season, and he says, I want to know, I should be shooting the technical. I should be shooting the free throws on a technical. And he goes, you know, Damon Lowry, he didn't even play in the NBL last year. So why are you getting, he's saying this in front of the team.
Wow.
And, you know, this is what goes on in team meetings. You know, you can share it now, 20 years on. And I'm telling the truth here. And I said, well, look, I really trust Damon. I coach you. It doesn't matter what level you play at. If you're in a pressure situation, I believe it's the same. I've seen him make big free throws, you know, in games where he coached Ballarat. He goes, well, you know, I was in the NBA and I should, and all the guys are looking at him. And you would not believe this, but you can go back through your footage. We played Adelaide, and the club has never beaten Adelaide. That's what you need to remember. We'd never won a game in Adelaide. I think, in the whole history. It was the only team that we'd never beaten on their home floor. And I always kept saying to the guys, we've got to be able to beat Adelaide, Perth, Townsville on their home court to win the championship. And as you know, we had to go through those three teams. But the story behind this is that night we were 1 point, I think it was 1 point down, and guess who got fouled with 5 seconds left? Charles. So, and the assistant coach, Eric, you had to know, he elbows me, he goes, let's see. I can't repeat actually what he said because I know this is going, but let's see if we can make it down. And I said, listen, Eric, I actually wanted to make both of them. Don't worry about what happened during the meeting. So anyway, so he only made one. We went into overtime and lost, and no one said anything because he was saying he should be shooting all the free throws. But there's a story behind that, and I have to fill that in because, now I'm thinking about the confidence and how he carried himself. So I took him to the press conference, and you'll probably find the footage through Fox somewhere. And they said, do you think the crowd affected you tonight? And he looks at me, he goes, hell no. And they go, what do you mean? He goes, I just pretend they're cheering for me all the time. And so everybody was laughing. I thought that broke the ice, and we didn't get the real tough questions about, they weren't as tough questions. So I thought that was important. But that night we went back to the room, and, I'm going to tell you the truth here. It wasn't good. So we're in the meeting, we're watching some clips, and the players start blaming each other. Some of the players actually they were yelling at each other about holding on to the ball and not sharing the ball. Anyway, I said to them, listen, just calm down. We've got a game to play tomorrow. I want to talk to you about opportunity. And I shared with them this story. I don't know if you guys have heard it before. I've told it once or twice. I talked to him about how, when I was a player with the Nunawading Warning Spectres, how we lost in Adelaide in the NBL Grand Final in 81. And we were all pretty young. I think I was only 21 at the time. And Alan Black was captain. I think he was about 25, 26. And remember Peter Stacker, not Ian Stacker. Well, the three of us walked outside of Apollo Stadium, and we were pretty angry and upset, but we threw our runner-up medals into the car park out the back, right? Because we were in disgust with ourselves about losing the grand final. And, which is a pretty immature thing to do as you look back now. But, we were pretty cocky and probably arrogant to a certain point, thinking, we're going to win it next year. Runner-up's not good enough. And so what happened was, about 7 years later, I was playing, we were playing Adelaide, and I think I was playing for the Spectres of the Saints, and I thought, I've been to the finals a few times, but I haven't been to a grand final. So I didn't tell anyone. I jumped in the car and I drove back to Apollo one night while everyone's having dinner, because we were playing Adelaide the next day. This is when I was a player in the late 80s. So I started walking around that car park to see if I could find that runner-up medal.
Oh, my God. 7 years later.
Yeah, well, I reckon it was 89 or something, or 88, something like that. It might have been 8 years later. And I'm walking around hoping one of them would be sticking out of the mud, So I never shared that until, obviously, this night I said to the boys, now you're all arguing with each other. We need to focus on what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. But let me talk to you about opportunity, fellas. Wollongong, I haven't won an NBL championship. I never got to a grand final again. So it's 23 years. Now the Hawks have never won a championship, and they've been at this point in time, right? So they've been in the league and never won a championship. I said, this is it. This is the opportunity. This is our destiny. Now we've got to come together as a group. There's no point blaming each other. And I told them the story about about the medal and saying, hey, I'm still waiting to play and win that championship. I'm not going to get one as a player, but this is an opportunity as a coach, and you might never get one as a player. This could be your only opportunity you'll ever have. So I shared that with them, and later on, a few of the guys told me that had a big impact and, refocused us on what we needed to do. And as you know, it was a bit up and down in that game 3. There's a few stories in that as well along the way about players' confidence and belief probably fluctuating. But I always felt when the game was close that year, any game, if we were in 4 or 6 points with 3 or 4 minutes to go, that we could win it. And I believe the team felt that way too, because we won 12 games, I think, by less than 5 or 6 points. I think it was something like that. Or so many games, might have been more than that. But I know we won 12 of our 14 games on the road as well. So we played that card saying we're the Road Warriors. We can do this as well.
But before we dive into those stories about in that game 3, let's talk about a couple of those things. As you say, 12 wins on the road that year, 9 at home, 12 on the road in the regular season. And the stat man gave me, like you said, 12 and zip in games decided by 3 points or less.
I didn't know that. I thought it was that's pretty good.
Amazing.
It is
amazing. What was it about that squad, that group of personalities, the mix that made you so tough? On the road, and you won, as you say, you had one in Perth, in Townsville to win the championship, and B, to be able to make sure you got over the hump in those close games.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, Leah. When I first got to Wollongong or Illawarra at the time, they always talked about they'd be happy to make the playoffs. And when I looked at their record, they never hardly won on the road. And I always had a big belief that, if you're going to win anything, as you know, in any sport, especially when it's a 5-game, 7-game, 3-game, and you're at home and away, you've got to win on the opposition's court. So a big focus of mine from day one was to change that mindset. They always won at home, and everyone loved them at home. And as you know, some players play well at home. Some players play better on the road. Some players can't play on the road. They go to water, unless they've got the support behind them. Let's be frank about that. So the psychology for me was to try and ingrain that ability to win on the road. And the theme we come up with, obviously, or I came up with was, develop that warrior mentality. You walk into someone else's gym. A couple of years before that, when we got rookies in Saville and Campbell, they were all intimidated. I can remember taking a tape measure, and you've probably heard this story before, to where was it, the Adelaide Stadium at Clipsal, because you know how loud that was. I measured the rings, and then I went up, sat in the stands, and I started yelling at the players while they were at the shooting. They're like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm just letting you know the rings are still the same height, and so you're going to cop it tonight." I've been copping in Adelaide since 1979, since I was a player. So, it's just part of the psychic that they get into you. So you've got to be able to cope with people yelling at you and yelling abuse. So, and it took a few years probably for them to understand that. And the other part of this was that we knew we weren't the best team, so we put in a hell of a lot of work to win close games. So, we had different things we'd go to in a obviously a close game situation to make sure we're going to get across the line. Because you look at the talent levels that I reckon we might have been the 5th or 6th most talented team. Maybe I'm being generous, maybe I'm not. But I look back at that Perth, and the Titans didn't get there. There was so much talent there, beating Adelaide and even Townsville. So we did a lot of scenarios on winning close games. And then once you win a few, obviously the belief and the confidence grows. And obviously I put the ball a lot. It was in Lowry's hands a lot of the time, Damon, because I trusted him that he could beat anybody off the bounce. But if I had Saville with a mismatch in the post, and if you look back at the Adelaide game, you'd probably see us posting up Darnell Mee in the post, trying to get him into foul trouble because I felt he was their main player, but they put him on from an offensive point of view. So we focused on trying to get Darnell. And then there was the Melvin Thomas. He was a mismatch. He was a nightmare. He's a bit like Green out of, for me, the Warriors. He's that undersized. But he said he was a better shooter. So Mel could knock down the jumper, and he could take bigs off the dribble. And then if they put someone small on him, we post him up. So they're the sort of 3 things, I guess, that I could play with matchups to get across the line in those close games. Right. Even now I remember that. So. And then there was Charles. You could count on Charles hitting an open shot. He didn't care about anything. So in the clutch. So.
It's fascinating to hear that mentality. So you guys, you're literally, as a group, you thought, look, the idea here is to hang tough, and it sort of reminds me of Jimmy Valvano, NC State, up against Five Slammer Jammer, and his mentality of like, be in a position at the end of the game to win, and if we're in that position, we'll find a way to win.
Well, the difference between Jimmy and I was, I said to my guys, "You're open, you shoot it, you back yourself." He was holding onto the ball to make it 52-50. And again, that's all part of my development, is to watch stuff like that. You Valvano, it's funny you bring that up. That's certainly part of the thinking of how to win close games. Except though, I guess, I want my players to feel confident. So I actually encourage it, and it's probably a knock on me. I know from some players, that I've coached said, I think your best players should take every shot. And I said, well, who's going to shut your best player down in the big game, and having been a part of Nulla Whiting in the early days, all our inputs is to take the majority of shots. And I believe we lost a lot of the finals because other players weren't conditioned to step up during the season, so they couldn't step up in the playoffs with confidence. So that probably had an effect on how I coached as well in trying to create or put confidence into the individuals too, because as you know, coaches are smart. They're going to take away your strengths. So probably the player that's least expected to shoot it, if they get left with a shot, you want them thinking, okay, the coach is okay with me taking this, not, coach won't want me to take this. They're not going to make the shot. So we had that mentality as well, as well.
You mentioned there, of course, players gain confidence, and it went from, in your mind, maybe the 5th or 6th most talented team in the league to the team that ended up hoisting the trophy. Do you remember an exact time that you were like, hang on, we got something special here, and that translated to the players gaining that confidence?
Yeah, I think it was winning in Perth during the regular season, and because
it's actually funny even to today how often that answer is actually the answer to this exact question on all clubs and players. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's such a tough place to play, and from day one, as you know, they've had the resources, they've had the stadium, they've had the talent. Again, you go back and look at that team that we beat. Ricky Grace, and I had the Ricky Grace rules when we played against them. We had special rules for Ricky because everything went through Ricky. Paul Rogers was on that team. Scott Fisher was on that team. James Crawford was on that team. And now I'm starting to think, how in the hell did we beat them? There's more names I can rattle off there.
Yeah.
I think Marcus Timmins was on that team. Anthony Stewart, like their talent level. So that was massive. So beating them during the regular season, and I said to the guys, obviously I was disappointed we didn't beat Adelaide. We lost that game, as I mentioned. But we won in Townsville, and we to beat Perth in Perth I said, boys, if you can beat Perth in Perth, we can win the whole thing.
What were the Ricky Grace rules?
Well, the same as the Shane Hill rules. So if you look at them, like even though Shane was the right hander, it wasn't about belting them or putting them through the floorboards like Detroit did with Michael Jordan. Although let me tell you that I did share along the way the Bulls build with the Hawks in respect to how you go about winning and shared responsibility. So in my eyes, you probably heard me say that Saville was Pippen, but how we defended people was collectively as a group. We tried to create, you go back and look at it, I'm pretty sure, Liam, we had 5 or 6 guys average double figures. So I tried to take it away that Melbourne had to win it for us, or it was who had the mismatch was going to win it for us. As I just said, we tried to identify the mismatch. So you'd see different scorers step up. So we had 5 or 6, but look, the Ricky Grace rules and the Shane Hill rules, I'll just talk about Shane for a minute. I remember when we played them at the Superdome. This is the same year, and Brett Brown was coaching them. And Brett was bragging about how you had this new offense, and I didn't know what it was. And Shane went for 52 on us, and they beat us by 30. So yeah, and we had 7 days to play. So that night, I'm up all night, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, geez, it was interesting talking to the guys. Like they're going, I think Matt Campbell said, he only had 28 on me. Yeah, and you broke it down. I think you had 28 on Matt and 18 on Sam. But anyway, but part of it was with the offense. So what it was is shakes, which you all know now, which is a Mike D'Antoni offense. It's pretty much what he's running today. So still today. And so what I did, and Brett compliments me with this because he said I was the first coach to ever do it. I noticed just Shane was coming off the on-ball freely and doing whatever he wanted. And, we tried to go under. So what I did, I looked at it, I went, he loves to go left. So, and that's why I say Ricky Grace, even though Ricky Grace is left-hander. Shane, most of his scoring, when you broke it down, there's no analytics back then. I just did it manually, obviously looking at game after game and making my own chart. And so I was ahead of my time, I guess. Just kidding. But it's really what analytics is today. It'll break break the player's shot down of where they take them from and how many makes they're going to have. So I said to the boys, I don't like this. I normally like you to contain your opponent, but we're going to shade, and I use the word shade instead of push.
Yeah.
Because if you push a player to their weakest hand, they'll still manage to score when they're that good. But we shaded him to his right hand all night. And so on one side of the floor, and this is really tough to do with teams, to get them to concentrate to this level and remember it in the moment. So when the on-ball came, they had to push on one particular side of the floor. And what I call it push these days, they call it ice, but I always called it push. And we'd have the big guy in a drop zone. But when he came the other way, we let him come over the on-ball. And from the other side of the floor to his right, we actually sent him to his right, and we'd give a bit of a show, but he always liked to sort of just move his body back to the left to get his shot off, right? So, and if you evaluate Ricky, you know, Ricky was always going left. So, you know, you could overplay him, and he would still try and go left. And that's what he would say. If you asked me, he said, I'll just keep going lefter, right? So if you go back to game 2 and you watch our game 2 in Perth, they killed us. But, you know, again, this is another story in that, because some of the players weren't accepting responsibility. And I remember Steve Carfino saying, oh, what a great adjustment by Joyce as the coach for game 3 to win. But I made no adjustments. I really ripped into the team and said, you didn't execute what we were supposed to do defensively. And going back to Shane, the next week we beat them by 30. All right, so Shane had 18, which is still a fantastic amount of points, but we restricted his efficiency. We threw challenges at others. So within 7 days, it's a 60-point turnaround. So then, you know, I used those rules for any time we played Ricky, because everything was revolving through Ricky with Perth. So then all of a sudden, you know, that's how we beat Perth. So we stuck to that in the playoffs. We won the first game at home. The second game, the big boys, you know, they weren't in the drop zone. They didn't show. It wasn't really the guards. And that was an argument in a team meeting about whose fault it was that night. There were some guys sulking because I was challenging them, saying, we're not changing the game plan, because one of the players said to me, I actually can't repeat what he said to me. But basically, you screwed up, but think of another word. And he just blurted it out in front of the team. And I had to hit him hard and say, no, look at the footage. I didn't screw up. We didn't execute. So we're staying with the same plan. So with Rick, you know, in game 3, he had 10 turnovers. And we won that game 3. We were down at halftime, but we just did a better job of executing what we wanted to do defensively. So they were the Ricky. So from there on, we had the Ricky Grace, Shane Hill rules. And the boys were conditioned to play them that way all the time, anytime we played them.
We still need to we're going to get back to game 3 and go through some of the ins and the outs of that game. But I find some of the stuff you're talking about really interesting, because, I mean, a lot of these stories involve team meetings where guys are shooting off the hip, right? So how do you balance an environment like that to make that a positive thing where players feel empowered to talk about that and it actually helps the team flesh things out, versus a situation where, as we all know, that can become a really negative theme and drive the team apart? Oh, yeah, blow you up. Absolutely. Well, I think if the boys trust you and get to know you as a person and know that you truly value them as people, but also about where we're going, I think that comes through in the end. So the work's done earlier. But again, as you say, if you let things get out of hand in those meetings along the way, it can blow your team up, and people can take things personal. And Mel's probably never heard this before. Like I'll say it. Mel was the one that said to me, you know, you screwed up. It was a bad game plan. But I knew it was coming, you know, because that's his personality. All right. In respect to, he's such a fierce competitor. And you'll find this with great players. And I'll say the most optimistic people, the reason why they're so good, they do blame others. That's their way of shutting it down and staying focused and having their own belief. I've read a lot of books on optimism. You know, so with optimism comes those sort of traits that they have an undying belief in themselves. And it's actually, in some cases, you're better off blaming others so you can move on quick rather than internalizing it. Whereas you've got pessimism, you're looking too deep within yourself or blaming yourself that you can't get up. So there's positives to that. But understanding Mel's personality as well, I think, as a coach, like he's highly competitive, wore his heart on his sleeve. I played with players like that. That probably helped me see that and understand that without blowing up. But what I did, I had a strategy. I knew that he would be the one that would come into the team meeting and say something like that. And he doesn't know this, but he's going to find out if he ever sees this now, what we did. And Damon would tell you this. I got Damon and Charles. I got the guards in.
and I had the video footage ready to go. And I said, listen, I want to show you the clips of last night. And I said, guys, we didn't execute the game plan. Let's have a look at it. And I said, but before I tell you what I see, I want you to tell me what you see. Because remember, they're my point guards, right? And they're the ones that, they're the on-floor generals. So I needed to get them to understand why I wasn't going to change the game plan. And because I just consciously, sometimes players just want change to justify the reasons why they lost. And sometimes you will change the game plan, obviously, even if they think it doesn't need changes from a psychological point of view. But I just felt, knowing the strengths and weaknesses of Ricky and the players, that we needed to get this done. Otherwise, we weren't going to win. So I said, guys, what do you see? And they said, oh, the big guys, they're not showing here. Axel's not in the drop zone, never was. Axel Dench. Yeah, it wasn't just Mel. It was just our big guys just weren't switched on, as I mentioned before. And I said, well, guys, I'm going to put it on the guys. We're going to go to the video. And I said, you know what's going to happen here? They're going to blow up. And I said, Mel's probably the one that's probably going to blow up. And I said, we got to convince these guys. It can't be just me. Right. I said that we've got to convince these guys to stick with what we need to do to get it done. And so we got to the team meeting, and the first thing that comes out, you screwed up, and you didn't use the word screw, but it's okay. And I knew it was coming. And then the players jumped in immediately, Charles and Dunn. They go, no, it wasn't coach. We need to. And you know how powerful that is. Wow. And so they put it on the line to challenge a couple of the teammates in the right way. It didn't go down real well. Let me say that. It wasn't accepted straight away, saying, no, we don't agree. And then we watched the video, right? The video is not supposed to lie, right, guys? Well, all of a sudden the video was lying. No. But as you know, it doesn't lie. So, Mel was the tough one to get him to buy in at halftime in that third game. He was struggling mentally, still from the challenge. And then at halftime, I don't know if Damon told you the story, but we're down at half. And I said, guys, we're inconsistent with what we're trying to do here. And really, Mel was the one that I guess he was down because he felt deep down, he started to think that he was responsible for that loss. That's what I think. Yep. So I went around the team, and I got this out of my Pat Riley book. I remember reading about how he challenged all the players, the New York players, and the language was, are you in or out? And Damon says to this day, it was really powerful. So I went to the players, are you in? And you couldn't hear a pin drop in this change. I said, because this is it, boys. If we beat Perth, we're going all the way. I said, but we're done. This is the end. And I went through them one at a time, but I left Mel to last. Everyone stand up going, I'm in. And then at the end, Mel stands up and goes, well, I'm in. And then if you look at it, I think he scored about 9 or 10 points in the second half, had a half a dozen rebounds. Right. And that was massive, mate. And then if you go from there on, Mel just kills it for the rest of the pass. We go to Adelaide on a high. We walk into their gym. I think that was our first win. We beat them by a point. We obviously lost at home and then beat Adelaide again, which you've done with Damon. But then there was this confidence, and again, that was a big turning point. And we really came together, even more so after that third win from that change room. And I look to this day, and I've said it a few times to Damon, what do you think? And he goes, man, that day you said, are you in or out? He goes, that was it. That's what he tells me anyway.
Yeah, did you personally, as the coach, ever lose confidence? Like when you're going into coaching meetings, not necessarily just this one, but any times, and you've got those competitive juices flowing and there's questions thrown your way, how do you not lose confidence in what you believe is ultimately it worked, but how did you not lose confidence in what you were doing?
I guess being responsible, you feel responsible for the team. So you tend not to focus on yourself. And this is where players are going to understand this is different. What's different about being a player and a coach? As a player, you're concerned about yourself. But as a coach, whether you win or lose, as you know, you just got to focus on the, it's an old cliche, mate, but it really is. Focus on the next game and coach in the moment. Mm-hmm. You can get down about a situation, a play or a quarter, but most coaches will be focused on, okay, well I know I am thinking, what can I do? What do I got to do here? How can I change it? How can I make it better? So without even taking a moment to lose confidence, you get down. Like I say to all coaches today, be prepared throughout the year that probably if you coach 30 games, there'd probably be maybe anywhere between 1 to 3 games. You'll wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, and you'll say, did that really happen? You know, and I mean, you know, I can recall going into, you know, we talk about in Adelaide, going into Adelaide and losing by 38. I think the year before, or, you know, while that young team was growing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to shake it off, because, you know, if players see you as a coach doubt, I think they pick up on it.
Yeah.
And again, I'd like to think I'm fairly optimistic, and I'm a bit like reading back to reading about optimism and pessimism, and that can be seen as arrogance. Cam, it might be seen as arrogance sometimes, but it's not. It's actually a conscious effort to maintain and try and be positive. And it may be that you could take it too far to the point where you're not being realistic, but I think you've got to err on the side of optimism and your own trying to, even if you're not feeling that great and you're not 100% sure, you definitely have to come up with some strategies that's going to give your players some confidence and belief. And when you do the work, now after that severe loss, the next day I was worse as a player. I'd carry a loss for 3 or 4 days, and you know what changed me one day. I think Daniel was only a baby. He were in the car and we lost, and I'm, you know, being a sook, and he turns to me and he goes, "What's wrong, Dad?" And I'm thinking, "What do you mean, mate?" He goes, "What's happened? Something really bad happened." And all we did was lost. And I'm sure a lot of players will tell you this. Kids change you. And then I thought, shit, I don't want him to feel like something's really bad. All that happened was lost the game. So I really worked hard to change my face on the way home with my kids. They also said some one things. I remember when one of the kids or one of the girls said, "Hey, Dad, what's a wanker?" And I said, "Why is that?" They said, "Oh, this man was calling you a wanker all night during the game." So there's some funny things that go when you look back.
Hey,
so
just
go on.
I was just going to say, and of course, Daniel, you mentioned there, you know, obviously professional player in his own right. Is he the same? Does he take losses? They had losses at whatever level.
He wasn't good.
How was he?
He wasn't good. He was a typical player, like, you know, and like most players, they get better, I think, with experience. So the kids probably changed my mindset. But in saying that, going back to your question, that made me think about that, Cam, in how I acted as a coach as well. You have to have the same mindset. I mean, if I walk in with my head down and upset after the loss, what are the players how are they going to feel? They've got to bounce back, right? Yeah. So you got to look at the strategy, work out, you know, what went wrong. And again, I'm a 75-25 guy. Okay, there must have been something good in the game. Let's look at what we did really well. So, because if you just continually, and I say this to coaches, don't continually show your players making mistakes. They're just going to lose confidence. Right. So, but you do need to see where your mistakes are. There'll be that odd day. It was that bad, Cam. You do got to go in and say, "Hey, we have to get real. And this video isn't going to be real good tonight." But you can't do it all the time, you know.
Which is a great segue back to that situation. Game 3 of the grand final series. Got whacked in game 2. Quick turnaround. Game the very next day in Townsville. What do you remember about the ebbs and flows of this game?
Yeah, look, there's things that stick in my mind where I think it was just looking at the beginning, and I look at even looking at the players, and you talk about the Tigers, your footy team smiling and being happy. Let me tell you, go back and look at my guys lined up. They're not smiling and they're not joking. And I'm not saying, you know, whether that's right or wrong, but I could see the way they were standing out in that middle of the court where the crowd was going nuts, that they were ready. You know, you just see the focus. So we were very, very focused. You know, we spent the night. We were up to very late at night. It was more than 12 o'clock, which I wouldn't normally do. Trying to get the psychic right of them blaming each. They were yelling at each other in the meeting room about whose fault it was, and just trying to get them all back on track. And as I said, I shared the opportunity about the story, but also took that time to write down just a message to each player about the position, asked them, you know, and thanked them for what they'd done, regardless of what the result was going to be. I was proud of them. I'll share that now. I haven't shared that with anybody, but I gave them all a note, personal note, how proud I was, and again, reflecting on the opportunity. And I wrote a couple of things about their strengths and said, you just got to bring that, and let's see where it all goes. But at the beginning of the game, the mindset, you could see they were ready. And it was fairly neck and neck. You know, it was fairly close, but there was a period where they did get out by about 8. And from memory, I'm just trying to think what quarter that was, where it was might have been the fourth quarter.
The fourth.
All right. And I reckon there was heaps of doubt, to the point where I know Mel, he took the ball out of bounds and just threw it in. And he basically just threw it to Davidson, who laid it up. So, you know, these are probably the strong memories. Because apart from that period of time, it was pretty close.
Just on that moment, and obviously we've all watched a hell of a lot of sport, you know, a lot of basketball, a lot of different sport. That moment for me, and this is 20 years later and watching the game, it's one of the most remarkable turnarounds in such a short period. You stop at home in front of this joint that's going nuts, and it's about to be a double-digit lead. The body language from your crew is at almost an all-time low. So the whole joint is just like momentum, home crowd, and the prospect of winning the first NBL championship for Townsville rather, just seems like it's just going to happen. And then you talk about Melvin Thomas, and the whole thing changes almost in a whim. And next thing you know, the game's over and you're cutting down the nets. It's the most remarkable last 8 or 9 minutes when it comes to momentum and what you believe is going to happen that I've seen in high level sport around the world.
Well, you know, as you heard it before, going back to Liam, you know, the focus was on obviously trying to reduce their efficiency. Goody could shoot. Rudy was tough down low. You know, they had Mike Kelly, Robert Rose. I knew everything about, the boys knew everything about Robert Rose. If you go back to the timeouts, saying this is what's going to happen, they're going to get the ball to Rose coming off and they're all switched on. We kept them, I think we only shot the ball at 36% to win that championship that night, but I think we kept them to 32%. They shoot. So we were locked in defensively all night. But that momentum shift, that was a big momentum shift. And I remember inside, again, not showing it and displaying it, I was quite angry inside because of the way Mel threw the ball back in. It was almost like, oh, this is over. And you had, you know, he wasn't happy. So I took him out and I decided to go small. I put Saville in the 4 spot from memory for those few minutes. So I think I had Lowry, Charles, Matt Campbell. I think I put 7 in the 4. And that was a huge risk, right? Huge risk. But it was just something that you make calls on the run. So we had a bit of mobility, it stretched the floor. And it was just purely because I was never going to not put Mel back in, right? Yeah. We weren't going to win it with Mel. But I needed to get him out so he could clear his mind. He walked past me and gave me the death stare. and he looks at me and I go, all I said to him was, sit down. Sit down. Yeah. Right? So, and then we held our own. We didn't really, I think we might have got within 6 or 4. And, you know, again, this is where coaches can't hold grudges or you know, be upset about you've got to keep the team in mind. And also you understanding your player's personality. He wanted it so bad. He wanted the championship so bad. His emotions would just let go for a minute. So, and again, you know, we've all experienced that as players playing with different guys, and you've got to know, you know, to give people another chance. And, you know, and then I called him up and said, mate, are you ready? He goes, I'm ready. I go, okay, back in. So if you go back and look at that moment, he was just phenomenal. Especially the last 4 minutes. A key play was it where he got a rebound from memory or went up strong, got a 3-point play and got fouled. That was absolutely massive. It was, you know, there was players started to make big shots, as you know, but that was a key turning point. And we got Brad Davison fouled out because he was playing pretty good basketball as well. And that was part of a big part of it was to post him up and, you know, take advantage, because he was difficult for us to handle. He could shoot the ball and he was good off the dribble, but we had a focus of, you know, one of the things was to try and post him up, especially with Charles guarding, and he ended up fouling out. It was probably not through us, but probably he's kicking himself to this day. Like I work with him, he reminds me how it was his fault. But that was a key, him going out of the game as well. But once we got going back to what you guys said, I remember I think we're 3 or 4 down, and there's a timeout, and I'm in the timeout saying we got him, and you know we're down. I said we got him, but you know,
did you believe that? Were you just saying that?
No, I did. Mm-hmm. I just felt that because they're on their home court too, the whole thing can reverse when the game's tight. As much as the crowd's behind them, the pressure's on them to get over the line and they can tighten up. And that's sort of a little bit about what happened, in respect to, and we just needed to keep executing for what we needed to do to score. And one of the other things we had was Damon. We always gave Damon space to penetrate, and he came up big and did some great things as well. Saville, they all had their own contribution. Axel Dench, he was not a 5 for us, more of a stretch 4, and we throw him in the post when they get someone smaller on him. So it's just how it came to an end, and it was similar. Like as you said, Liam, there was I think it was 12 scenarios that we were 11 maybe. I think the grand final might count as a 12, but I think it was 12 in the regular season that we were used to playing in that situation.
Do you believe in destiny? Did that season change the way you thought about that concept?
Well, I remember saying to Steve Carfino after the Damon knocked down those free throws, and as you all probably know, we lost our manager. During the series, going back, things roll into your head about turning points. Another turning point from memory was, when I think about it, we were playing the Kings, and Sav had a massive, probably his game that he's put everybody, because he was always put down by Ian Stacker. I'll say it, that he was the poor man Sam McKinnon. And that's another story too. One night we walked in, during the season, we walked into the Townsville training gym and had all this stuff crossed out about Sav, and it had, Stacks had referred to the poor man Sam McKinnon. So I saw that and I thought, I'm going to use that. And I did. Don't worry, I didn't hold back and say, have a look at this, Sav. So, and they were mates, but I actually got tired of him saying he wasn't as good as Sam and just referred to. And I'm making me think back, this game, I'm sure he had 20 plus. He had like 15, 14 boards. I think he cut his head that night with the headband. And Dave Lesky, who was a Vietnam vet, he was out there mopping the floor up. All right, so he was affected by all that. And none of us knew. We knew he was sick, but we didn't know he was that sick. And then he said to me, Chock, I'm going to have to go in the change room. And he goes, I'm not good. So so somebody else took over mopping the blood up in that game. I ran into the change room and he's laying on his back. And then I knew things were really serious. So he was very, very ill man. And not long after that, so we went out and beat the Kings that night. I think Charles hit about 10 threes that night. They kept going under the screen, but Sav had the game of his life. But the memory of Dave Lesky mopping up the blood, we didn't know he was dying. He didn't tell us he was dying. We just thought he was sick. And then obviously a few weeks later he passes, and he asked me to speak at his funeral. And I only known him for a year, but I knew him a lot because we used to go for walks during the day knew a lot about him. I was surprised when his wife asked me that he'd requested it, but it was something that lives with me to this day, that I'm proud that I spoke at his funeral. But just the courage of that man and knowing what he was about. And he talked about Cosgrove. Cosgrove, as you all know, was his leader. The admiration he had for that guy, and he shared some things. I got him to share some things with the players about what Cosgrove demanded as a leader and them as a team. So there was so many things that come into play. And so the black armbands, you probably saw from that time on, he was gone, we got strength from him. To this day, I think he blew Damon Lowry's shot. And if you look at that third shot and you were in front, mate, I don't know how it dropped in. The last one, probably 75% of the ball was on the other side of the rim, or either everyone in the crowd was standing up and blew it over the rim. I don't know. But, to this day, if you look at the balance of the ball, usually, so we do refer to Dave being with us, Dave was with us.
It's incredible that ball went in. So that's a story that you tell, but as you look back on time, do you really believe that? Did this season change the way you think about those things?
So going back to your question about destiny, I think all those moments create a destiny. And I think the fact I hadn't won one, Wollongong Illawarra hadn't won a championship, it was time. And I said to Steve after that LA game, Carfino, I think it's our destiny. And I know somewhere along the line, I think in one of these things he talks about that I mentioned about destiny. And I did share that with the team, but we're in control of our destiny. When you get to the playoffs, you're in control of it. Sometimes destiny's taken out of your control, but we talked about control.
You mentioned, obviously, long distinguished career as a player and the runner-up medal story from a little earlier, so no championship. But what was like the buzzer goes, you're in Townsville, you've got that championship that you've for 20 years, more than 20 years been chasing. Was it relief? Was it just exciting? Like, what was the emotion for you?
It was like I was excited with inside, but relieved. I was just proud. You're just feeling proud and happy. I look to the air. I thank my dad. He wasn't with us. Mum was watching it on the TV. He's not with us, so I know how she came to the Adelaide game and those games in Wollongong. And one of the beautiful things, I look back at some of the highlights from Fox. She's in that crowd reaching over, and I get a hug from her. It's a massive memory. But I looked up to the air, thought about Dad. Wish he had been there. A million things go through your mind all at once. How happy you are for the team. You look around. My wife wasn't able to be there. The kids weren't able to be there because it was an away game. I heard that Townsville had stuck all our supporters in the last row at the very top. So I don't know what sort of psyche that created over the gym. So we had the last row. They wouldn't let them sit together in a group. So that was their psychology and making sure we didn't have. But it was just a feeling. I guess, Cam, it was relief and satisfaction. Just proud.
What was it? Everything you expected it to be? Like when you go through the career and you got to stay in the moment, as you've touched on. But at some point, either as a player or as a coach, you would have allowed yourself for even a split second to think, that championship. What's it going to be like Was it exactly what you thought it would be?
Yeah. I guess as a player, you probably tend to celebrate it more. Because Damon Lowry came to me. There was a function, afterwards in some big bar. I can't. Was it Moose? What is it called? Moose's or something like? I don't know. Something in Townsville everyone went to, and I was hardly drinking. And Damon goes, "Come on, man, we've won now. You got to relax, and it's over." I go, "D, it's not about that." I said, "I just want to sit back and look at you guys." And I stayed. I only had a couple of drinks, didn't have much. Just took it all in. You could just see how happy they were. So that's what was really special. And then the bus ride home, to get up, like there's so much footy. It was a massive thing, as you know. We were a small town. We weren't a big city team. So I reckon there was so many people drove up to the airport. We had our bus. And one of the happiest things was my mum was there. My wife was there and the kids were there. For me, that was a really unbelievable, special moment as you came through security and I saw them there and the hugs and, the family, like the families of our players. I remember saying to the guys after we beat Adelaide, and they'll probably tell you this, I said, you're all staying out on the court and go get your wife, go get your girlfriend, get them down on the court. We're going to celebrate this. Because I did learn that we might not win the grand final. So let's celebrate, getting to the grand final. And, we've got another 7 days to get ready for the first game anyway. So having lost one and being angry and throwing your medal out, I thought this is a pretty special moment to celebrate that third game winning it. So we did that as well. And then, some people said, you probably shouldn't have done that. They're going to be stuck in the moment. They're over-celebrated. There's all different opinions, as you know. But the bottom line is we won the next game. So
I'm sure you know this, but Damon 100% assured us that he celebrated long and hard that not the championship, rather, that Game 3 win against Adelaide. He tells a wonderful story about a door knock and Fox Sports the next morning. So they lived the moment, as I'm sure you well and truly knew.
Yeah, and let me tell you about Damon about winning the championship. We couldn't find him for a while. Like when he got back to Wollongong, he was missing for a couple of days. So he was celebrating and living it and loving it with the crowd. And he's running out in that stage. We had to tell him to put his beer down because there's 4,000 people out there and kids. And Lisa rang me one time. She goes, "Brendan, Damon's not home. Where is he?" And that's his wife. And I said, "Go to the Steelers Club." Last time I left, he was at the Steelers Club and he was walking around on the bar area, and everyone was cheering for him. Basically bowing to him like he was a god.
A couple of days ago on NBL Overtime, we were looking at the way all the teams are being put together for next season. We actually had a bit of a conversation about star power, how important superstars are, and those elite players to winning championships. And we talked about how sometimes we feel like depth can be a little bit overvalued in the NBL. But this particular team is the complete other argument to that point. Because we've talked about some of the bigger names like Charles and Sav and Matty Campbell and Melvin Thomas and the Damon Lowry, but you guys, your bench was big for you that season with guys like Grant Kruger and Matt Garrison and Matt Shanahan, guys that you pulled from various different places around the country. What do you remember about those kind of lesser known names on that squad?
Oh, plenty. We had depth. Maybe not in a superstar way, and Damon will talk about that. I remember Fox Sports talking about it. Well, first of all, remember we played 48 minutes, not 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So when you get to a 48-minute game, it's hard to play just 7 players. They're going to fatigue for how you want to, especially for how I wanted to play. Pressure defense, still played with pace, look to attack. You're not going to get away with it. So you don't need 10 superstars, but you need players to play their role really well. And someone like Matt Garrison was an American that was willing to accept coming off the bench and could just, on his night, ignite. He could just get hot. Sometimes he'd be horrible. But he was one of those guys, too, that could ignite the team. You had to keep it really simple for him. You couldn't complicate things too, a lot with Matt because he actually had ADD. And I don't think you'll mind me saying this because it's great for kids, I think, to know this, you can play this game. So knowing that, we used to have longer video sessions and meetings about how to play the game and where he needed to be. And I couldn't make things too complicated for him. And I only learned that. I didn't know that, obviously, the first year I coached. I started to figure out something was wrong when he come back because he couldn't remember everything. So rather than just say, oh, this guy can't play, we worked out a strategy, right, on how he could play with us. And so from a coaching point of view, I really needed to simplify things when he was on the floor. Otherwise, he would overthink and it'd be too complicated. So his was really simple, mate. If you are open, shoot it. Do not hesitate. Yeah. You have got no, I don't want you doubting yourself, even if you miss 2 or 3 in a row. Because the other advantage with his mindset was that he was into a routine. Like it's sort of, you've got to get guys like that into a routine and you don't want to have them deviate in the way they think. And that's something I learned. I mean, you can say that about a lot of players, but in particular, his case. So if you go back to that Adelaide game, he was massive. Like he got hot. I think he had 20 plus. But then there's games he would get down on himself too, from a personal point of view. And that was internalized. But I understood that. So a lot of times he would keep everybody else up anyway. Like his personality being so up and lively. But he had the moment where he was down and we had to understand that and pick him up. But we had depth. Matt Shanahan's role, same thing, mate. You're a great 3-point shooter. Do not hesitate. If you miss a couple, it don't matter because that's what you do well. Bring that to the table. So there'd be games throughout the year. Even game 2 we lost, he was probably one of our best players. He knocked down a few threes. But I said, if we got it rolling, the other understanding is, mate, you might not play. So, but when you're when you're out in the floor, this is what we expect from you. Right? So understanding your role. I'm just trying to think. Say we had Garrison and Matt and Krugs. Well, Krugs' role was to set screens. Krugs' role, if you go back to game 3, we talked about Ricky Grace in Perth. He played 28 minutes. Probably a lot of times he only played, it'd be anywhere between 10 and 18. But he took Rogers completely out of the game in game 3, just physically. Got into him, got him off his game, blocked him out every time. And he actually scored. Like Grant wasn't known for scoring, but put backs, and then his confidence went up. He hit a couple of shots. So in his own way, he was that type of guy. He was the guy that was down and dirty. And, Melvin Thomas just hated practice because he had to go against Krugs every day. So that helped Melbourne as well. But, yeah, we didn't have the superstars, as probably Damon would say, but in our own way, everybody was pretty special in what they brought to the table. And I think that's what coaches have got to figure out. You can have a system, but that system might not cater for the strengths of your players. So you have to be able to adjust that system to suit the strengths of your players. And so we had depth. I remember you can get it on YouTube. Sav does an interview where he talks about our bench because Fox started to think that we were a realistic chance of maybe winning it. So we started to get some publicity. And Sav talks about how, and it was true, our bench sometimes scored 40, 50 points, you know, in the game. Now the game's back to 40 minutes. You definitely can get away with leaving your stars on the floor, but it gets back to your philosophy as well. You know, is your stars just out there offensively and you want them to play the 40 minutes? Because I'll guarantee they're not giving you the whole 40 minutes on defense. So the game, everyone forgets the game's played at two ends, I think, a lot of the time. And so when they, you know, you'll see people say, why are they taking the star off? Well, he probably needs a break because they still want him to have that intensity on the defensive end. But then some of them can, like Robert Rose was a freak. Robert Rose, he could play offense and defense for 48 minutes. You know, those guys, long, sinewy guys, they just never get tired. The Kawhi Leonard, you can go with all, you know, so, but in the 40-minute game, it's definitely easier, Liam, to play with 7 players, but I don't think you'll win a title. You won't win a title with 7 players. You better condition 8 or 9 players because you're going to have an injury or someone's going to get into foul trouble. So you do need to condition those other players with some playing time to step up. Whether you share their minutes, I'm not sure about that either. It gets back to the coach, each coach's philosophy and how they see it.
Speaking of coaching philosophy and everything you believed in and everything you're working towards, okay, so you win the championship, there's that relief, you spoke about the opportunity. On the back of it, with everything that had happened in that year and everything you had achieved, did you change? Did your philosophy at all change when it comes to coaching? Did you notice, you know, maybe a little drop in motivation? Did anything change going from winning that championship to the way that you approach the game from a coaching sense?
Not really, because I did a lot of research on back-to-backs and, you know, we're a small town. It was going to be a big challenge, but I did a lot and I challenged the guys. And I remember Damon saying to me, you know, he had a crack back. I remember the second year saying, you know, you're demanding too much of us and we're bringing it. As you know, the second year, still had a really good year. I think we're in the, you know, we were thereabouts, but we had an injury too, a couple of injuries, which didn't help us. But I still believe the motivation within the group fluctuated times because they climbed the mountain, you know, and yeah. But in saying that, I wouldn't say it was bad because we were thereabouts still to try and get there again. Yeah.
No doubt. It is one of the it's a great game to watch. You know, if you're from far north Queensland, you're an old Crocs fan, you're not going to enjoy it. But all you Hawk heads out there right now who are already getting psyched up, of course, we head towards NBL 21. It is a wonderful game. NBL, wherever you get your vision, all the socials, Twitch, NBL TV, whatever it might be. Hashtag NBL Rewind to throw some questions. You're getting bigger and better on Twitter every single week too, Joycey. So just for people right now, what is your handle if people don't follow you?
I can't remember. I think it's Brendan Joyce _12, isn't it?
There you go. You know what? Just search Brendan Joyce. I'm sure we're going to tag you in something from the NBL next couple of days. But you can get involved as well. Hashtag NBL Rewind. Great deal of fun. We could do this for about 3 weeks, I reckon, Joycey. I no doubt we'll do it again
guys.
soon. So thank you, mate. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck.
Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. NBL Overtime back next week. Isolation conversation this week, Liam. You got someone lined up?
We're working on it.
Okay.
Keep it under, not quite locked in yet, so I'll keep it under wraps for now.
Yeah, well, you know what? Every other week, you're well and truly prepared. So I took a risk and I failed. So just forget that happened. Hashtag NBL Rewind and get involved. Keep it locked on the NBL socials over the weekend. We will speak to you next week.